Okay, let's keep reading Zack Power Undercover. We're up to chapter 6. Zack dropped to his knees and crawled over to Checkmate. He still didn't know where the green muck was coming from. Before he could locate their attacker, there were more green blobs flying in his direction. Zack rolled onto the ground, but he wasn't fast enough. A huge glob of goo hit Zack square in the back, almost knocking the wind out of him. He did a commando roll over to Checkmate. Staying low, Zack dragged the struggling agent over to the scientific observation safety cage and slammed the hatch behind him. "This is going to hurt," Zack muttered, digging his fingers underneath the hard glob covering Checkmate's face. Then Zack ripped the hard green blob off like an old band-aid. "Ouch!" spluttered Checkmate, gasping for air and staring in shock at Zack. "Agent Rockstar, where did Lockpick go? Is he dead?" I am Lockpick," Zack said, feeling around on his back for the FF Matrix chip. But his fingers only found sticky green goo. "Right, sorry, I was Lockpick, now I'm Rockstar." "What are you talking about?" said Checkmate, still breathing heavily. "I'll explain later," said Zack, trying to wipe the green goo off his fingers. It hardened and stuck fast to his jeans. "What's attacking us?" he wondered, trying not to panic. "We're safe for now, but we can't stay in this cage forever." Then Zack realised that the weapons lockers were wide open. When did that happen? He scanned the room quickly. There was a group of robotic guns marching across the floor towards them. Checkmate had dragged himself up next to Zack. "Oh no," he gasped. "Those are SAG-11s. The robotic guns were firing as they moved. Fat globs of goo splattered against the outside of the cage. "What are they?" Zack asked. "What is it? Sticky Storm, automatic glue gun. Stags. Sticky Storm, automatic glue gun. SAG-11s are Sticky Storm, autobotic glue guns," said Checkmate wildly. "They're operated by remote control and are programmed to suffocate their targets with sticky glue. At least I know you're not the mole now," said Zack, ducking again as green goo hailed down on the cage. "Me? A mole?" gasped Checkmate. "What made you think I was a mole?" Zack ignored Checkmate for a moment, trying to think quickly. "Surely you'll need top security clearance to activate SAG-11s. That means the mole has to be someone pretty high up." Suddenly Zack remembered the feeling of being watched in Agent Big Boss's office. "I should have listened to my instincts," thought Zack. "I knew something wasn't right. Someone knows I'm in the building, and they're out to stop me." Then Zack had an idea. "Checkmate," he said quickly, "how do you program the SAG-11s so they know who to hunt?" Lots of ways," said Checkmate, leaning heavily against the cage wall. "Sometimes they go by visual recognition, but that's not always reliable, so they search for ID chips." "Aha!" yelled Zack, as more goo rained down on the cage. "They're programmed to hunt my ID card. That is how they knew where I was, even though I was in disguise." Zack pulled Checkmate to his feet. "When I say go," said Zack firmly, "you have to run to the exit." Checkmate went white. "But—" "1," said Zack, slowly pulling his ID card out of his pocket and pushing gently on the cage door. "2, 3... Zack kicked open the cage door and flung his ID card into the far corner of the room. "Run, Checkmate!" The two agents bolted towards the exit as the SAG-11 swung towards the ID card and fired. A shower of green goo exploded in the corner of the training zone. Zack sprinted out of the door of the training zone with Checkmate right behind him. He slammed the door shut and pulled the spy pad, dialing quickly. "Leon," Zack said, breathing heavily, "you need to send a security and cleanup crew to the training zone right now." "What's wrong?" asked his brother. "Did Checkmate do something?" "Checkmate's not the mole," Zack replied. "We've just got attacked by a group of SAG-11s. On the other end of the line, Leon made a choking noise. "What?" After he'd hung up, Zack turned to Checkmate. "You can head home if you want," he said. "I've got to wait here for the cleanup crew so I can get my ID card back. And make sure the SAG-11s don't get loose. And complete my mission," he added silently, checking the time. Agent Checkmate nodded. He was still white as a sheet. "Thanks, Rockstar." Zack shrugged. "Any time." "Hey, you're not a suspect anymore, but why have you been meeting up with Switchblade?" Checkmate looked awkward for a moment. Switchblade is my cousin, he said. He works for Big, and I've been trying for years to get him to join our side. He was always a problem, even as a baby. I knew he'd get me into trouble one day. Chapter 7. It took the clean-up crew more than 4 hours to deactivate the SAG-11s and remove the gunk from the walls of the training zone. Zack had waited impatiently the whole time, pacing up and down the corridor. Leon sat on the floor with his toolkit, fiddling with the FF matrix. Finally, the head of the clean-up crew emerged from the training zone, holding Zack's slightly sticky ID card. Zack took it gratefully. Thanks, he said. Leon, we need to get going. I still have to track down Agent Test Tube, and I'm running out of time. Leon and Zack took the lift back up to the Advanced Research Lab on level 27. When the lift doors opened, Zack and Leon pulled out their ID cards and prepared to have their faces scanned again. Once they got past security, Zack and Leon ducked around a corner. Leon carefully fixed the FF matrix onto Zack's back and checked to see if anyone was around. It's clear, he hissed. Zack punched the FF matrix screen selections into his spy pad. Instantly, the holographic micropulses transformed into a grey-haired man in a white lab coat. Okay, you are Agent Screwdriver, Leon whispered to Zack as they hurried down the corridor towards the lab. You're visiting from the Hollywood office. Just don't forget the geek phrases I taught you that time, and remember to put on an American accent. Leon led Zack over to Agent Test Tube. They walked carefully through the maze of shelves filled with electronic testing gear. Secret weapon parts and new spy gadgets at the back of the lab At the back of the lab sat a short man hunched over a mess of wires. Agent Test Tube, said Leon, tapping him on the shoulder. May I introduce you to Agent Screwdriver from the GIB Hollywood office? Test Tube looked up. He was bald and pink-faced and wore thick round glasses. Ah, welcome, he said, shaking Zack's hand eagerly. I hope you're pleased with what you've seen. Oh, yes, drawled Zack in a thick American accent. I love your work. I read your article on vector bosons in the June issue of Fundamental Particle Physics magazine. I found it fascinating, especially the section where you argued against the old formula for calculating photonic spin. Behind Test Tube, Leon quickly gave Zack the thumbs up. Tremendous, beamed Test Tube. He looked delighted that Zack had read his work. I'm interested to know, Agent Screwdriver. What do you think about my idea that the theory of supersymmetry predicts the existence of particles like leptons and neutralinos? Zack's mind went blank. What the? But luckily Leon came to the rescue. He cleared his throat loudly and said, Agent Test Tube, leptons and neutralinos aren't nearly as important as the intelligent jelly corrosive acid bomb you've been working on. Why don't you tell Agent Screwdriver all about it? Chapter 8. Zack held his breath while he waited to see if Test Tube would take the bait. But the scientist seemed happy to ramble on about his latest invention. Absolutely, he squealed. Well, the IntelliJelly is based on the Portuguese man-o-war jellyfish. I've built a robotic version from experimental high-flex plastic, and instead of poison sacs filled with venom, the IntelliJelly has sacs of metal-melting sulfuric acid. Wow, said Zack, forcing a smile. Instead, he was feeling nervous. It sounds like an extremely dangerous weapon, he thought to himself. I know, said Test Tube, nodding happily. He walked over to a cabinet and gestured at two lumpy, jelly-like blobs. I designed it to locate enemy ships and clamp onto the hull. The IntelliJelly then releases its acid to burn a hole underneath the sink the target vessels. And because my invention is robotic, it can also live, move and attack out of water. That's amazing, Agent Test Tube, said Zack, trying to keep his voice light. In fact, it sounds like something Big would be very interested in. Test Tube's grin was suddenly gone. Screwdriver, the scientist spluttered. I'm insulted that you'd even suggest such a thing. Besides, at the moment, I have a small problem. What's that? Asked Zack, almost forgetting his accent. He leaned in close to Test Tube. What kind of a problem? Test Tube shook his head. Well, this morning I had 3 IntelliJellies in my cabinet, but now there are only 2. Zack glanced at Leon, but before he could say anything, he suddenly felt a squishy lump land on his head. Zack reached up and felt a cold, smooth suction pad the size of a football. Slimy tentacles reached down over his ears and wrapped around his neck. Oh no. The missing IntelliJelly, test tube gasped, looking at Zack's head. It had dropped from the ceiling and clamped onto Zack's skull. How do I get it off? Zack yelled, pulling desperately at the suction pads. His holographic disguise flickered and then disappeared. Leon shook Test Tube by the shoulders. In 30 seconds, the IntelliJelly will release its acid, Leon shouted. Tell us how to release its suckers, or Zack's hell will dissolve. I don't know, Test Tube stammered and then gasped. Oh my, where did Agent Screwdriver go? Keep cool, Zack told himself, his mind racing. Just think. He looked around frantically, then grabbed a large syringe with a long needle from nearby. Perfect. Zack took a deep breath and then gently poked the needle into the IntelliJelly. He pierced the acid sac and sucked the deadly liquid into the syringe. Zack, be careful, Leon said shakily. Zack drained the acid sac and pulled the needle out. He threw it into the chemical waste bin nearby. Then Zack grabbed a boring-looking textbook from a bench and whacked the IntelliJelly. The deflated gadget fell off Zack's head and shattered on the floor of the lab. I'm so sorry, whispered Test Tube. I can't believe the IntelliJelly did that. Zack ran his hands through his hair, trying to fix it up. He hated it when his hair got messed up. I can believe it, he said, feeling annoyed. Someone has been after me since my meeting with Agent Big Boss. He glared at the shattered plastic on the ground. It must have been programmed to target me, he realised. It didn't go for anyone else. But who would have the security clearance to set it to attack one of GIB's own agents? Then suddenly Zack had an idea. He grabbed a nearby pair of tweezers and went over to the IntelliJelly. He carefully dug around in the broken plastic until he found what he was looking for. Aha, he said, standing up and holding the brain chip carefully. I think I know how we can find out who programmed the IntelliJelly to attack me, he said. Test Tube, help me upload this brain chip to your computer. His hands shaking, Test Tube gripped the tweezers and gently placed the brain chip in the analysis tray of his computer. You're right. The IntelliJelly records the IntelliJelly records the personal identity of the last agent to program it. It might take a while to decode it, though, said Test Tube, tapping away at the keyboard. You've got to hurry, said Zack. We're running out of time. The global backup is only an hour away. Leon and Zack leant over Test Tube's shoulder as he scrolled through page after page of codes. The clock was ticking, but the decoding was taking ages. Have you found anything yet? Asked Leon anxiously. Almost, said Test Tube. I'm just confirming the decoded identification now. A green box flashed up on the screen. Test Tube leant forward, a strange look on his face. Oh dear, he said, shaking his head. The computer has made a mistake. This has never happened before, but I can't see how it could be him. Leon nudged past Test Tube and examined the screen. His jaw fell open, and he turned to Zack. You won't believe this, Leon gulped, but the personal identity code belongs to Agent Big Boss.